everyone. My name is Harry Wall. I'm the Vice President of Education and Public Programs here at the Greenwood Cemetery, and I am so happy to see you all out here on this very rainy Sunday afternoon. Whether you came on the Fiber bike tour or tried to rent the art train today, we really appreciate it. As most of you know, today is our first Sunday in the cemetery, which will hopefully be a more recurring program. We do death education throughout the year, but we really want to bring it all together, really bring as many people together. I'm not sure if you've been in any other panels or if you've coached death education here before at Greenwood, but what's really important for us is to build community that talks about grief and dying and memorialization, and often topics that are sometimes considered taboo and sometimes they're considered not polite for any sort of company. We really want to create a space where people feel free and open to ask questions, to talk about it together. So a lot of what we're going to do today is also have the opportunity for you to ask questions of our panelists who are here. So we'll have, the program is about an hour, but I'm hoping we'll keep about 20-ish minutes or so for Q&A. I have plenty of questions to fill the silence if no one else has questions, but we want to make it so you have the opportunity to ask the panel who we brought here. And of course, as you know, there's also panels throughout the day. So I hope that we stay or have been boards that will stay with us today. And please check out our website. There's lots of death education programs throughout the season and the summer. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and sort of what their work with pet grief is.
I'm going to try to speak in the microphone correctly. My name is Dr. Jessica Kribbelwar. I am the owner of Paws at Peace. I'm a veterinarian and I do exclusively hospice care for pets, so pets that are near the end, and home euthanasia to make their transition and their last days here as peaceful as possible.
I'm Lauren Seeley, and I am a death and grief doula. I formerly worked at Compassionate Care Acclimation in Long Island, doing water cremation for pets. And that is where I started getting into this type of work. I first originally got into this work for humans, but then realized how much pet parents really needed that focus as well. I help people make plans at the end of life for their pets. I hold space for people in anticipatory grief, grief around loss, and post-loss grief. I do lots of creative workshops and talks on getting people to just show up as they are and process their grief around fellow grievers. So, yeah.
My name is Jennifer Muldowney. I am also known as the Glam Reaper. Lovingly bestowed upon me by the British media when my first book came out. I am the owner of Muldowney Memorials, which we provide celebrants and event planners, like wedding planners, but for funerals. But we also have a lesser known Rainbow Bridge Memorials, which started at the same time as the human side of my business, but is the quieter one of the two, just because it's still a sort of a taboo subject. And so I think that's why we're all here today. I've suffered the loss of 2 of my own pets, and so I'm hoping I won't get emotional today. I also did a TEDx talk, which, spoiler alert, it's only 5 minutes long, but I'm talking about my dog in it. But it's something hugely important to me. And well, I've always done the celebrant and the funeral planning on the human side, and we do it for pets as well, which some people are like, that's crazy, but as we are all here today, it's not crazy. And we're all here, I think, to see each other in either your current grief, your past grief, or just generally talking about pet loss. So yeah, that's mine.
I will say, as the owner of 2 dogs, and I never had pets growing up, so we grew up in apartments in Brooklyn my whole life. And my mom's like, no, we can't have dogs. Like the landlord, 3 apartments we lived in, all the landlords said we couldn't have dogs. And then finally, when I was 22 years old, my mom's like, oh, we could have had dogs this whole time. I just didn't want mom to clean up after those. So now I finally have 2 dogs. So I have 2 dogs now, and I'm like, my dogs will never die. I hope that I go before my dogs. The idea of not being around my dogs. And so I know it's a difficult topic. And so I just want everyone to feel like this is a space where if you want to share a story during the questions, the Q&A part, please feel free to do so. But I do want to start personal with the three of you. How do you get into this line of work? Like, what was sort of, like, I mean, you've all sort of touched upon it a little bit, but like, what was sort of like the turning point where like, this is something I want to commit to, or this is what I want to do as sir?
Yeah, I don't think that if you asked me 20 years ago that what I'd be doing, it never in a million years did I think it would be this, but sometimes you just sort of find your calling. My background as a veterinarian prior to doing hospice care and euthanasia was in the emergency room as a veterinarian, in the animal emergency room. And you get to save a lot of lives in the emergency room, but you also see a lot of death. And you also, unfortunately, witness a lot of suffering, because sometimes when we try to save a pet's life, we try, and they pass away in the hospital alone without their family around. And that's a really hard phone call to make when you have to call someone and say their loved one died in the hospital. And, I think as veterinarians, I sort of practice saying to people, it's okay to stop. And a lot of times they don't teach that to us in school. We're not great at it as a profession. Most veterinarians aren't comfortable talking around death, but I just became really comfortable with it and telling people that it's time to stop. Let's give them peace. And you see the relief that washes over people when you give them permission to give their pets a peaceful ending instead of fighting, because they feel guilty. They feel guilty thinking about euthanasia. They won't bring it up a lot of the time. They won't bring it up themselves. And so it just became important to me to really help people with this aspect of their pet's life, which is a really important aspect. We don't like to think about it, and we like to pretend our pets live forever, but I'm a big advocate for planning ahead and knowing what we're going to do when pets come to difficult situations, even though we don't want to think about it. That's how I came to this work.
To add to what she was saying about giving people permission around euthanasia, and making the decision to give your pet peace when they're suffering and when you're trying to keep them alive. That's a lot of the reason why people will come to me as a death doula, is because I can help them make that decision when they don't want to make it, and say, here's the signs to pay attention to. It's okay to want to end their suffering, and you are a wonderful pet parent for doing that, because you see that their quality of life is suffering and you want to make that stop for them. And a lot of people struggle with that. So giving them permission is really a powerful thing. How I ended up getting into this work, well, I grew up with a pet shop. My grandparents owned a pet shop. So I had a zoo in my house my whole life. I mean, I'm talking like 10 birds, lizards, snakes, dogs, cats, you name it, bugs. And I loved all of those pets. Some I felt more close to than others. I have been creating pet cemeteries in my backyard since I was very young. And I have been officiating ceremonies for friends and their pets since I was very young. Did I ever see that as being something I would end up doing for work? No, I didn't. But here we are. So I just really have always understood how special animals are and how important they are to us as companions. The love that we receive from pets is unlike human love. They are just completely perfect and flawless and can do no wrong, even if they're eating your things or peeing on the floor. But they give you this unconditional love that you don't receive from humans. And sometimes the loss that we suffer from a pet passing is bigger than you will ever imagine, and is bigger than losing a human can be at times, because of that unconditional love that they give us. And I just really saw that and wanted to let people know that I understand that. I know what that feels like, and that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be seen for your grief, and not just, okay, that happened, now let's move on. So that's where I come into this work.
Oh God, I can already feel I'm getting emotional with this talk. I know it's really a lot. I came into it, I'm from Ireland, if anybody hasn't heard of my accent already. 16 years ago, two friends of mine died. One was only 23 and one was 28. It was very sudden. My grandmother had passed previously, and then we had to put our dog down. And I still, and that's where like it's crazy. It's 16 years ago, but like I still remember it like it was yesterday. And God, I really don't want to start crying, but the judgment around it, and just did we make the right decision? And it's a lot. It really is a lot. And just listening to you guys just talking, and like that, I thought she would live forever, and grew up together. Like I told her everything, which is a teenage girl. It's a lot of things. Not always good. And so this unconditional ball of fluff was never, I was never going to see again. And then we got her granddaughter. We actually joked that her little soul went up and came back in the form of her granddaughter, Poppy, who passed last year. And my first talk the TEDx talk I did was actually based around Roxy, and that was our first dog. And it was interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever done a TEDx talk, but the experience is kind of wild. But I was there to talk about sort of human loss and the loss of my friends and how the business came to be. And the guy who I was doing the coaching with, he was like, no, we need to hit on something. We need to hit on something. And he just kept poking and poking. And next thing I started talking about Roxy, and I burst out crying. He was like, that's it. I was like, great. But I based the talk then around judgment, and how like it doesn't actually matter whether it's your grandparent, your mother, your father, your dog, your iguana, your rat, your tarantula, although I have feels about that. But anyway, but it doesn't matter what loss you've suffered. Why are we judging people at all? Like, why is there a hierarchy? Well, I lost such and such, so therefore I should be grieving more than you. And I really felt that. And so, yeah, that's sort of how it came to be. Was I lost one dog, and it sort of escalated from there, and we started doing cremation jewelry for pets. And just in Ireland as well, we're a small country, very Catholic, and pet loss was definitely not something that was kind of considered. So I did quite well and got on TV and stuff with a lot of it. But it's really just, seeing people who go through pet loss, the shame, the judgment, the spirals that they go through with euthanasia and stuff. It's really a lot. And even though I do the human side of it, the pet side of it is just really has my heart. So
I guess I'll also add that I mostly work with humans around death and end of life. I work in a funeral home. But I see the importance in pets as I do in humans. To me, they are parallel. If not, I definitely see that pet loss gets a lot less recognition. So it's important to me that people that are grieving are seen too.
Actually, rolling two questions into one that I had, and you both sort of already touched upon it. So you've all done your homework, which I really appreciate. How do you validate and normalize pet grief? It's funny, I've talked about it with friends, and all my friends have gone on to have kids, and I've gone on to have dogs. And so when I've like made these comments about like, oh, when my dog's died, I don't know what I'll do. And one of them said, well, you get another dog. That's just what you do. And I was like, okay, I'm already preparing, like, laying a habit, and it's so strange actually to start already thinking about it. Another friend told me that once you get a pet, you set the clock. Like there is an expectation, there's an expiration. It's heartbreak on 4 legs. That's just 3 or 6 or 8 or however many legs or 2. So I was curious, like, how do you normalize that grief, and what are some of the misconceptions? So, like about like what pet grief is.
Not going to say the right thing here, but because we lost Poppy just a year ago, I work in the business like for 16 years, and I was so devastated. Like I still to this day, like I cry myself to sleep sometimes. Like I have this little eye pencil, makeup pencil that she chewed up, and I still have it, which I don't know, is that crazy? But I'm just like, no, she physically touched this. Like I do the jewelry and I do the memoir, and I have spent the last year, having moments where I've cried, and then I go shame myself. I'm like, Jen, get over it. Like, for God's sake, just get over it. Put your big girl pants on and let's go. And then I have to literally be my own client. And I'm like, no, like if you were sitting with somebody, if you were sitting with Lauren or Jessica and they were going through the same thing, you would be like, take time, and it's okay to grieve, and it's okay to do all of the thing. It's hard, and I think each person's path is completely different, and it's so I don't think there's a right and a wrong. That's the thing. I don't think there's an answer to that question, or I haven't found it yet. There's lots of ways, and I think we all grieve massively differently. Some people grieve in anger, some people grieve in tears, some people grieve privately, and some people grieve publicly. I personally, as I said, I work in this business, and I still had to have 4 sit-down adult conversations with friends of mine who I sat them down and I said, "You've abandoned me. Like, where were you when I needed you? I've shown up through your divorces, through your losses, and I felt like abandoned." And, and we had to have that uncomfortable conversation, which was lots of tears. But I was just like, no, like, if we're going to be best friends moving forward, I need you to show up. And these are the ways I need you to show up. That's how I've dealt with it. It's still a work in progress. I'm still, privately grieving and crying and stuff. And I don't know if pet loss will ever fully get the recognition or anything that human loss will. I honestly don't, which is sad to say. But I think if enough of us can come together and sort of be there for people, I think that's really all that matters. It's, it's a tough one. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of when what you were saying about telling yourself like move on, get past this, it's not our fault. Society teaches us that we're supposed to grieve a certain way and then move on. And as we know, grief is not linear. There's no start and end. It just is continuous, but it shifts, changes shape. So because I believe that, pet grief is minimized a lot. A lot of the work that I am wanting to do with other people is finding ways to continue that relationship once the pet is gone. What does that look like? Maybe you create like a memorial space for them. Maybe you're constantly talking to them. You're going on walks and you're visiting their favorite place to play fetch, or what are all the things that they loved? Continuing the traditions of, remembering those things and making them part of your life. I think having conversations with your pet after they're gone is a good way to continue writing about them, journaling, writing songs to them. Are you a musician? Go ahead, make a song about them, write a poem to them, write a letter to them, just there's so many different ways that you can honor that relationship after they've passed that can help you still feel that attachment and love to them, but also comfortably sit with your grief. I don't believe in working through your grief, getting rid of your grief, but it is good to be intentional about getting to a place where that grief looks more like love and comfort from a continued relationship, because losing a pet is really hard and we don't want to let them go. But you know what? You don't really have to completely. You can continue that relationship through love and, veneration. So
I love that idea. As far as, one, normalizing your grief, I would say try to ignore the people who are being jerks. Because there's always going to be jerks out there, and seeking a community, it is so grief is like this weird physiological process. You see animals go through it. When you see a mother lose their, like a baby horse that is lost by its mother, they go through grief. It looks similar in many ways to humans' grief. I think ours is different, but it's a process, and it's not necessarily related to like how, as you were saying before, how important somebody was. Like this relationship or this grief is more important. Like, a mother is more important than a husband or a pet. And people go through grief unrelated to death, breakups, divorces, any sort of loss can lead to grief. So I think, with pet grief in particular, and I think people will use the term disenfranchised grief to describe grief that is sort of dismissed by other people, seeking community, because you're not alone and it can feel really, really lonely. There's a lot of lovely people like these ladies here who can support you, as well as online communities I find are really helpful. When I was going through the loss of my own dog, you can feel like you're crazy, you just feel like you're a crazy person. Then you see that there's other crazy people out there too, like you, and you can talk to them and relate to them. And for me, that certainly helps. And I think a lot of people can find help in support groups and online communities and things like that.
And while you have been how do you help people who are struggling with the question of what is the right time?
Yeah, of course, that's a really, really difficult question. And, the more I've done this, the more I think sometimes there is no necessary exact right time. You tend to fixate on a particular thing of when the very last possible day that we can say goodbye to our pet is. And as a veterinarian, our Hippocratic oath, which is, the oath that we take, very similar to the oath a physician takes, is a little different. Because one of the main things in our oath is to alleviate animal suffering. And so, every case is really, really different. I would say there's some platitudes that don't help very much, like you'll know when it's time, because no, you won't. Or when the bad days outnumber the good days, and usually there's just a pendulum swing, and most illnesses just don't progress linearly like that. So I would say one of the things that we don't see a lot in society anymore is we don't have great relationships with our medical providers, whether they're doctors or veterinarians. Have a veterinarian that you totally trust, because if they know you and your family and your needs, everybody's different. I would say that's not the same answer for everybody. Like, for example, I will tell my clients that have a dog and heart failure, for example, if they're somebody who's a stay-at-home person, they're retired, and they can be with their dog 24/7, they may be able to take that a lot further than someone like I could when I'm out 12 hours a day. And I couldn't allow a dog that could potentially suddenly start developing breathing issues be home. And I would have to sadly make that decision sooner than some of my clients would. And so it's really individual. It depends on the family. And I think getting someone you trust, because a vet you just met is going to be very hesitant to give you a really recommendation sometimes, because they don't know you. They don't want you to. We do sometimes get yelled at by people when I say it's time. If I think it's time, and people are like, I don't think, it's just grief. And so if you have a relationship with someone and that trust that you can build, it can really, really help. Because when I had to make that decision, I couldn't make that. Even on the veterinarian, I didn't know when it was time. I needed to have people I trusted around me to help me know that answer to the decision. So that's a helpful thing. More specifically, there's sort of different trajectories of diseases. So it's a hard question to ask generally. There are some quality of life scores online. I find them challenging, and you might have a score of 0 on can your dog walk and a score of 10 on is it eating, and that doesn't mean the quality of life is bad. If you have a big dog and it's down and it's getting bed sores and it can't walk, it might have a quality of life of 0, even though it's eating. So some of these numerical scores aren't so great, although they can be a useful tool to use. But I would say, and the other thing is being honest with your veterinarian or whoever is helping you out, because there's so many things that sometimes we don't want to share because guilt is like such a huge part of this. And it's okay to share them. I will actually ask people directly, because I'll encounter people who've been sleeping in the basement with their dog because their dog hasn't been able to climb the stairs in 3 years, and their husband's up on the 3rd floor and the wife's on a mat in the basement. You have no idea. And they won't say to you that they're tired of dealing it with themselves. And so addressing things like that can be helpful too. And don't be afraid to say, I'm tired, or I'm leaving the country for a month, and who's going to care for my dog or my 21-year-old cat? So being really honest or if there's financial issues, and that's huge. People never tell us, but there always are. Everyone has financial limitations. So being really honest and having a relationship with whoever the professional is that's helping you make these decisions is I think, the best way to make a good decision.
How do you support people before the pet has passed? What are ways, you already started talking about having a trusted vet, having trusted family or friends who could help, but what are other support systems before a pet's passing?
That's very interesting, because I was actually just going to add to what Jessica was saying about, building a relationship with a vet that you trust. I think that's really, really important, to be able to trust the person who's going to help you make that decision, because, people will spend a lot of money to keep their pets alive, and sometimes they can't do it, but they do it because they love their pet, and they do it because they want their pet to live forever. I get that. I totally get that, but they won't say like, I can't afford this anymore. This is too expensive. My pet is clearly suffering. I can't keep them alive. Maybe it's time to make that decision. That's a hard thing to admit, And so it's really important that, people have, when they know that time is approaching, you have somebody there. It doesn't have to be a professional, like a doula or, but just somebody that is going to tell you the truth, somebody that you can lean on, that's going to say, hey, it looks like your pet is suffering. Maybe we should have a conversation about how to help you move forward, give you the support that you need to help you move forward with that. And so I think that I always, obviously as a doula, I'm here to help people make those decisions when they can't make them themselves, and support them in the way that I say, like, I see you, I understand what you're going through. I know how much you love your pet, but if you go this way, that's okay. If you go this way, that's okay too. The love is there because you're asking. I can tell that you care. And then sometimes just knowing that there's somebody that sees them, no matter what decision they make or have to make, it takes that pressure off of knowing what the right thing to do is, because there's not really a right thing to do. It's just, what does that look like for you? It's different for everybody. So I think that, I make myself available the most before, and I make myself available the most after, if that's what's needed. Most people need that support leading up to that point. After, it can be different. It varies. But I think that just, knowing that there's somebody in your corner that's going to, hold space for you to make those decisions and help you when your emotions are taking over and you just don't want them to die, to help you realize, or to help you see, like, this is how maybe you'll know when it's the right time. And honestly, most of my clients have been so brave and so strong and have been able to tell me, I think it's time. And I think that is because they have somebody there that's like, I'm here whenever you need to talk about this, and knowing that there's going to be somebody there that's going to listen, that really understands, or that really at least cares.
Well, so my part is more the post. So I guess we've got pre, during, and post a little bit. Because what we do is, well, first of all, we do it in Muldowney Memorials. We do it for pets and for humans. I do have a pet specific website, Rainbow Bridge Memorials, which there is a free memorial planner that you can download there, because I do find when people come to me after the pet, typically the pet has already been cremated, aquamated, or buried, and they maybe want to have a service or something. And not a lot of people can necessarily afford to pay for a celebrant or pay for an event planner for something like this. So that's why we put the PDF together for, because it's just an easy, free tool for people to sort of work through it themselves. And yeah, we just try and help guide people, when they pick up the phone. I've talked to people for 2 hours on the phone who've lost their pet, and they were like children to them. And sometimes, and this might not be the business side of me, but sometimes I'm talking people out of spending money that they don't necessarily need to. I mean, even myself, when we lost Poppy, we got her cremated. I wear her in different types of jewelry. She comes with me everywhere, so does Roxy. But just recently, in the same year, my parents sold our home in Ireland. And so we haven't got a permanent spot where right now she's just mobile and she's coming with us everywhere. But near where my parents are living right now in Wicklow in Ireland, there's a fairy trail. Okay. And I decided to buy one of these little fairy doors and I put her name on it, Poppy. And me and my dad went up there. God, I don't want to get emotional again. We just went up there and a little bit of her, kids can enjoy Poppy's home and or not or whatever. And like that might sound silly to somebody else, and that's fine. But this was just something. Poppy was my little popsicle. She was my little, we were besties. And away with the fairies is a term I always say because people will sometimes say, Jen, you're away with fairies. So it seems appropriate to me that that's where she is. That cost me the price of the fairy door. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be spending thousands in a beautiful venue. It doesn't have to be all the things. It's what means it to you, and what matters to you is wearing a piece of jewelry, how you'll remember her. Maybe it's a half-eaten pencil sitting in a cup now, that I have with her. It can be anything. It can be a full-blown. I actually think recently, one of you guys saw it. This is confession time. I watched I'm always calling it the Desperate Housewives, the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I think it was mortifying. I know. I'm sorry. But they had a huge funeral for, I think, their dog. One of them, I just don't remember their names. But they had a huge one where they all, of course, came in their designer hats and everything. So it can be whatever you want it to be. All of my trained celebrants that are trained up are trained to look after pets. It's still someone you loved. So there's no difference when it comes to my part in it. To me, it's no different. Actually, I probably get more emotional at the pet ones than I do at the human ones, which is maybe something I need to look at. So yeah, it's like, I think all of us is just being there for people, showing them that they're not weird, they're not crazy, or if they are, welcome to the community of crazies. We're all in it together. So.
I actually want to explore that a little bit more. And so I will say that Instagram is a terrible thing. For some reason, I recommended a video that someone made to commemorate their dog. And so I watched it at 1 a.m. And then by 4 a.m., I had scrolled through, I think, all of Instagram and every video about dying dogs that are dead, like memorials. And of course, in that, there are ads trying to sell me a piece of jewelry. The other one is you send in the fur and they make like a little replica statue thing. My dog shed a lot, so I've been really saving a bunch of that. So I walk several. So I guess so you already mentioned the very door, but what are some ways of memorializing a lost pet that you've seen that works really well? And I'm really happy you talked about the amount of money because my husband bought me a sweatshirt with the dog embroidered on it, and I was like, "Oh, this probably cost you $50," and he's like, talk about $300 more like it, because it's we had to send in the photos and had to make sure the hair coloring was correct. So I think it can get a little overblown, a little crazy. So I'm curious about in those extremes that you've seen, both really affordable, but also things that are really expensive. What is worked, you think, or what you've seen has worked really well?
So I do I like to craft. I have I host various workshops around grief with crafting, making memorial dioramas, which are like little shrines for your pet. I have one for my beloved cockatiel Taco that I lost 6 years ago, and I still miss him every single day. And he was the most perfect bird. He was so wonderful. Anyway, I made him a little memorial shrine, and I like to have workshops with other people where they can do that too, because how cute is it to have a little space, a little cute little creative space for your pet to live, to live on. It's like you're going to frame a photo of your pet because you want to look at them, but you can also create art, and so it also, I think that, that can vary price wise. You could buy glitter, you could buy glue. Maybe you already crafted, you already have all that stuff. So, hey, it's free because it already exists. But then there's also really beautiful memorializations, like custom pet urns with the shape of the dog or the shape of the cat. I mean, people are doing such amazing things with urns that people send me stuff all the time, and I love this because I consider myself a resource doula. So I love to share things with people that people share with me. And I've just been seeing some really beautiful ways that people are taking images of pets and making them into a forever piece of something, whether it's an urn or a piece of art, like a painting, or jewelry. It's just, it varies, everybody's budget is different. And I think that there are wonderful ways, whether it's making something yourself or having something commissioned for your pet. It just all depends on what you can do. There's lots of wonderful ways to do that. So
Yeah, I definitely think you have to sit down. The first thing when somebody calls or whatever or emails is sit down and figure out what your budget is. Like that's definitely, don't put yourself out of or in debt. As precious, like for me, as I said, jewelry just happens to be something I do. So to me, that was kind of easily accessible. But like that chewed up pencil is literally sitting in a cup that somebody sent to me that I think they got on Etsy, where it's the back of me, the back of Poppy, on this mug, and it just says friends forever, and it's beautiful, and just the pencil is in that. I have her fur in there as well, so it's a small thing, but it's just a cup and it just sits there. It's not necessarily a shrine, but it's just sitting there. Now what I do want on my wish list is I have photos of her that I put up, but I have seen on Instagram, because Instagram's a curse. And also I will say, fun fact, because that's the thing about it all, is it here's what we talk about or something that's happened in our lives, and then all it does is sell to us that stuff. So when Poppy and Roxy were Westies, then all I kept getting was Westies, photos of Westies, which of course would send me spiraling at 3 a.m, like crying my eyes out, which is great crack. So maybe stave off it if you're grieving, or just don't tell us what type of dog you have. But one thing I really, really, really want that I saw on Instagram was, and I think it's called like custom pet canvas or something along those lines. I don't know if anybody's heard, but it's basically they take the photo of your pet and create this beautiful painting on canvas, and it's a work of art. It's fabulous. And so I've decided that I'm going to Photoshop the two of them together and get this created, because I just moved homes, so I think that'll be a really nice. It's quite expensive, but it's like $500, so we're working on saving for that. But yeah, it can be whatever you want it to be. That's the point of it. Like if it's a fairy door, if it's creating a shrine, if it's a piece of jewelry, whether that's gold or like Etsy and Amazon. I know there's a love-hate relationship with lots of these type of online stores, but you can get a piece of jewelry for like $20 and put some ashes in it, put a bit of fur into it. There's lots of different options. So yeah.
You don't have to spend a lot of money. The most meaningful things, like when I come across my dog's collar, I start crying, and that was just nothing else really does that. It's honestly those little things. I had a client tell me last week she was gonna spread a little bit of her dog's ashes in every country she visited. I was like, that's so cool. So really, just little creative touches is sometimes the best.
So, does anyone have any questions for our panelists? I want to make sure we have time to answer anyone's questions. Yeah.
After death communications, they're pretty well known for human deaths. Like they used to be discouraged, now they're encouraged. Like 75% of people a year after somebody passed away have these. Recently, explanatory studies have come out with animals too, but it's sort of what your opinions on them. Or
often when I am seeing clients for the first, or working with clients for the first time, and they have contacted me after a loss and I never met their pet, I will sometimes see their pet in my mind sitting next to them, exactly what their pet looked like, and say, did you have this kind of dog? And they say yes. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what that is. Well, they're I can see them sitting next to you. I am an intuitive. I do not claim to be a medium. I'm not saying it's that strong, but I feel things and I sense things. And the way that I know that a person or a pet is present is I will see an image of it in my mind, and then I will envision it next to them. And that's how I know that they're there. And pets are definitely around you when you're grieving. And that's one of the ways that I like to help bring comfort to people after a loss, is that they're there. They may not be physically in front of you any longer, like tangibly, you can't touch them. But they are all around you now, and they are, they're very much still in your life. And that's why it's important to keep talking to them, keep honoring them, because they're there. They see it. They're grateful for it, and they still love you, and they want to continue that relationship with you. And I know that not everybody believes that, but I have seen it. And this is a lot of the work that I do as well, is around intuitive and energetic connection with people and pets after they pass, because they're still there.
I actually have a fun story about that. Well, it was a bit crazy, but I set up from Ireland, and I went to, there's an incredible fortune teller, card reader in Ireland, and I went to her one day, and she leaves you in the room for like 5 minutes or whatever to like let your aura get around the room. And I was sitting in the room, and she walks in, and she was like, I'm a card reader. I'm not a medium at all. But she said, she did my cards, and she started saying, but she said, sometimes somebody will insist upon coming into the room with whoever's there, right? And she said, okay, she said, this is crazy. And she started laughing, and I'm there going, what is this woman going to come out and tell me? And she said, okay, there's a gentleman here. And she said, but she said, the next thing I don't even know how to tell you. And I was like, oh God, what? And she said, well, there's a gentleman here, and he really has this urgent message. And she said, this has never happened to me before in my life, but she said, there are dogs barking and cats meowing at 90. Like she said, they're just like the noise. And she said, he's communicating that that they were saying thank you. Well, I burst out crying. So at the time I just started doing the cremation jewelry for pets, and it was doing quite well in Ireland. And she didn't know any of this. And so she was like, do you do anything with pets? And of course I'm like, not really, because I don't do anything with them living. I get given their ashes. So I'm like, I kind of just went like this. And she was like, well, they're here to say thank you. And that broke me, because I get so many beautiful emails from my clients saying, thanking me, saying I have my little baby back home with me, and in the piece of jewelry or whatever, in their new home, they'd say, which I love that phrase, and they're back home in my new home. But like just to hear from the animals, yeah, I was done in.
I had a question. If you can please, hi, my name is Allie. I'm a human death doula, hoping to become a pet death doula. And I know from personal experience with Rocky, I felt really guilty about not having or not wanting to, not being able to pay the $11,000 for his subsequent kidney surgeries, right? And it was actually my 16-year-old son at the time who was like, Mom, just have to let him go. It's okay. So how can we talk to our clients about finances and money? Like, I know I'm not a person for not spending that money on my cat. I know that intellectually, but I still feel it. I know that Rocky went downhill and after I got the dog, which is a whole other story. So can you address finances and how to talk about money and budgets and that delicate issue? And then separately, this is maybe a part 2 or a second question, I don't know. The non-animal people in the world, I think they're the ones who judge us and who call us crazy. We all get that, like, Leroy is my human son and came out of my womb, even though he's a Bichon, right? So how can we talk to the non-believers, us as animal people, to make them join our side? Do we want them to join our side? I don't know. So I had 2 questions: money and then non-animal people. So money first thing, yeah. So
I'm just a huge advocate. I think a lot of it, I think we could do a better job as veterinarians. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I made a financial decision it was partially financial, and thankfully I was informed medically. I think we can often do a better job communicating honestly about finance. I think you would find a lot of veterinarians would not take things as far as many of our clients do, because we understand. And I can tell you that the more money you spend trying to save an animal's life, the more likely it is you're going to fail at that. The animals that die in the ICU are the ones that the owner spent $20,000 on, and the ones that make it are the ones that were like $1,000. So an $11,000 kidney surgery, my guess is that whatever that was, it would be fraught with countless of complications, and the success rate would potentially be low anyway. And I think we as veterinarians can do a better job communicating. Okay. Also, I'm a big fan of ChatGPT, by the way. I ask it all sorts of questions, and if you're trying to make medical decisions, I would advocate consulting the Oracle ChatGPT, because it kind of can put together a lot of nuance from a lot of different sources, money, medical decisions, family, circumstances. And if you feed it all that stuff, it can kind of help you make decisions. And so I'm a big advocate of that. I know that sounds crazy. I've actually had clients tell me that they use ChatGPT for grief support. It was great. And that kind of scared me, but also I think that we can do a better job as veterinarians communicating about finances and what are the pros and cons of going ahead with different things. So my own personal story, my dog was about 13 and she had a lung tumor, maybe some spots on her livers where it had spread, but they weren't sure. And I took her to the vet where I worked. And I mean, I didn't treat her myself because I just can't do that. And they're like, oh yeah, you can go and do this surgery. We'll remove the tumor. We'll cut out the spots on her liver. We'll crack open her lip. She's going to need some chest tubes and, then she'll need chemo afterwards. I was looking at a $12,000 bill that I couldn't afford. And being a veterinarian, I also knew something that a client doesn't is that the likelihood of complications and that she actually makes it after all that is pretty low. The emotional side of me wanted to believe it. And I was like, oh yes, I'll do anything, please, just anything to keep her around. But then my husband at the time was like, would you be able to forgive yourself if she experienced complications from that? And I couldn't bear the thought of her going through all that surgery and then being in pain, rib fractures and post-operative recovery. I'm 13 years old. And if she crashed and burned in the hospital, I never would have been able to forgive herself. So I think you did the right thing for your cat, most likely, regardless. But yeah, finances are tough because oftentimes they dovetail with other things. And it just depends. Like if you have if you have a 13-year-old dog and making those decisions and you're looking at kind of a deteriorated quality of life already versus, a baby animal. And like, let's say you just need to orthopedically repair its knee, that's something that's going to have a good outcome for a long time as opposed to a pretty mediocre outcome for a shorter period of time. I'm not sure if that helps answer your question. I'm so sorry about Rocky, and I'm 100% confident you did the right thing. And we need to be more honest with our clients about money, I think. So I think that's on us as veterinarians sometimes.
I was to share my own experience with my beloved Taco, my cockatiel. I took him to the vet and found out that he had a large tumor. Now, if you know what a cockatiel looks like, they're about this big. He was a little smaller. And they said he had a 20% survival rate if I had surgery on that tiny little bird to have that tumor removed. And I was like, that's not going to happen. I'm going to pay for the surgery. He's going to die because he's an old birdie. And that's a big surgery for a little guy. His heart's not going to be able to handle that. So I had to make that decision right then and there to have him euthanized, and it sucked. And I felt guilt for a long time about doing that, but then was also telling myself, like, what are the chances he would have lived anyway? Probably very, very small, And as somebody that has witnessed a lot of pet loss working in a facility where pets come in after they've passed, I've seen a lot of pets come in after complications from surgeries. Like they've done the big surgery, but the pet still passes from complications. And so I know that's also very common, but I think that you have to be realistic too about what your budget is and knowing that, like, would you rather they have good quality of life for the little time they have left and they weren't suffering and they weren't having those complications? That's probably going to be the better decision if it looks like this or like that.
You bring up a good point. It sounds like your vet told you what Taco's prognosis was, which means what is the likelihood of success of this? And sometimes that's a really important question to ask is we as veterinarians can say to a veterinarian when they're presenting us with a treatment plan and options, what is the likelihood of good long-term success with this particular whatever that we're trying to do, and what are the possible complications that they could experience. So knowing those facts can, in these cases that are very financially difficult and complicated, help us get a sense of whether or not it's going to be worth it.
I just want to add something small that it's not small though, it's huge. It's a whole other topic, a bit like grief and AI is when it comes to like what we're talking about here, euthanasia. There's a human equivalent to that, which is, as I said, a huge topic. I know I won't touch on it today, but a lot of humans, because we can actually answer back, a lot of humans could say, just let me go. I would love to just hug you, hold you now while I'm full consciousness and let you go. And that's the really shitty thing about pets, is they can't communicate that back to us. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I mean, I literally to this day, when we let Roxy go, me and my mum were hugging each other and she just looked from our eyes back and forth. And all I kept haunting me for years was, which still does, is was she saying why? Or was she saying thank you? And we'll never know. And so that's the shitty thing, is, there is a human equivalent to all that we're talking about today, but we can fight back, we can talk back. And that's the wonderful, precious, beautiful thing about pets, though, right?
It's impossible to believe, but it's true, is that there is no pet in the world that has ever thought, I want to make it to Christmas this year to get a Christmas present. No pet in the world has ever, this is a uniquely human problem, that we are scared of death. We contemplate our longevity and how long we want to live. Pets only care that they're happy every day that we're here. And so there's a part of me that sometimes think, like, all these medical interventions we do, like, maybe we shouldn't be putting our pets through all that, because, like, they didn't ask for it. We can't ask them, oh, did you want to go through that surgery? And I lived briefly in Ireland, and there are all these dogs that were poorly taken care of that just ran around outside. They all got hit by cars at 3 or 4 years old, and all I could remember is, man, those dogs have great lives compared to American pets, like, even though they died really young, because they don't care how long they live. They only care that they have joy here every day that they're here. So
I actually was on the opposite side of that. I did pay the $10,000 for my sorry. And she didn't make it, obviously. I had her since I was like 9. It's 26 now. But I have that guilt over putting her through the surgery, and she didn't die. She had breast cancer. Her mother actually was in the video. And she didn't die from the surgery. She died 2 weeks after, because the cancer just metastasized all over her body, and putting her down was like, she was purring, and the doctors were there, and they were so kind and everything, and the best thing I could have done. But the guilt, and like, people don't understand why you would spend all that money on your pet. And I've had people who were close to me just be straight to say, like, well, I would never do that for my cat. I was like, well, that was my soul pet. She was my baby, and I think it's just hard to, when you do put in all that effort, but you don't make it anyway.
It often makes it harder. Some of the clients that have the hardest time letting go, I think, are the ones that have done all this. I'm so sorry for it. That just sucks. There's nothing else to say, but that really sucks. And cancer can go F itself. So, that a lot of the times we look at things in hindsight. We're like, we think about what if we had done the other course of action, and you guys are both on the opposite sides of the same coin. But when we're making decisions with the best information we have at hand. And sometimes we make the right decision and there's still a bad outcome because it was just crappy, because bad luck, all sorts of crap happens. Complications can happen we can spay a dog and it can die on the table. It's rare, but like, that's sometimes you do the right thing and something bad still happens. And those are the kinds of cases, that just break my heart, and cancer, sometimes it just does crazy things. And we look and we see, okay, we should do this. There should be a good outcome. And then there's just not. There's just a bad outcome. And I can tell that you 1000% did right. You 1000% gave your cat the best life. I can just see how much you loved her. So, and that's really what matters in the end.
I'm so sorry that happened. And I think that you loved your pet, and so you were willing to do whatever it took to keep her alive and to, help her get past this point where she was unhealthy. And, like Jessica was saying, sometimes we think we're doing the right thing because we love them and we want to keep them alive. And you are doing the right thing because you are trying to prolong her life. But medical intervention is very tricky, and sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't. And that's unfortunately the way that it is. But the guilt that you're feeling for doing that, you are a wonderful pet parent and you were doing right by her. And what happened shouldn't have happened, but it did. And I'm sorry.
One quick question. Part of the hesitancy I think people have about doing euthanasia is because they had maybe a memory from childhood or something when like they had done with their pet. But a lot of things have changed in the last like 5-10 years where there's a lot of mobile vets now where they do euthanasia at home. It's an entirely different experience. I'm just wondering, how do you see that changing the landscape?
Yeah, and so my company, Positive Peace, we just do all home care. Because I really sometimes pets have to die in the hospital. They just are there. They can't get home. But if there's an option for it, I think it's very nice for them to be at home. And I try to talk to veterinarians about this subject because the classic way is you take your cat or your dog or your bird to the vet and they place an IV line, which is a little stressful for the animal because they have to get shaved and sometimes there's some restraint involved. And then we give medications in an IV. When we do it at home, my goal is always, and I can't 100% of the time achieve this goal, but I try to achieve it the vast majority of times, is that as sad as we are, the pet is happy. I want the pet to be happy. Like I'll come in, smile at the pet and, feed it treats that it's eating. Some of them aren't. If they're sick, just kind of quietly enter. So I'm not scaring them in any way and just be, as calm and safe of a presence for them as possible. And use a combination of oral and injectable medications given with a teeny, teeny, tiny little needle. And then those medications, they're like, I have to do a lot of paperwork to carry these medications around because they have a lot of value on the street because they feel really, really good. So that's always my goal. Let them just have their last moments in whoever their loved one's lap or their favorite spot, and just, that's the goal. And so that's where like the planning thing that you said at the beginning comes in, because if we don't, and I know I did this with my dog, I didn't want to pretend she was dying. I stuck my fingers in my ears and pretended it wasn't happening. She died in the hospital. And, thinking about it and making an end of life care plan, which is probably similar to like an advance directive, and know if this happens, would I pursue treatment, and knowing what you would do when you're in a relatively calm frame of mind. So that, because when we're panicking, we make bad decisions a lot of the time. So it's much easier to think about what you would do given different scenarios ahead of time so that you can actually plan for a beautiful death for your pet, which sometimes emergencies happen, sometimes crap happens and everything's bad no matter the best of intentions. But a lot of the times we can achieve that. We just have to be brave to think about these things that we really don't want to think about. So
I just wanted to say that my first dog, who died about 25 years ago, my first adult dog, had 3 laminectomies and 3 ACLs. And that taught me a lesson. And every subsequent dog, which 3, they all had cancer. And I had insurance for every one of them. And it made a tremendous difference. So it was a gradual investment monthly, but it did pay off.
That's a really good point too. And I have insurance for both of my cats. And people are like, "You're a vet. What do you need insurance for?" It's expensive for us too. And for me, having insurance it's pricey. And sometimes I look at my monthly bill and I'm like, why do I keep paying this? But then it does take that sort of financial question out of the equation, at least a little bit. The other important thing with pet insurance is it is a reimbursement model. So I have had people show up to the ER with insurance, but they didn't have any credit or money to front the bill. So it's always important to also have a plan for being able to pay the bill, because the insurance company pays you back. So if you don't have a credit card or enough money in a bank account to pay the bill, you can have insurance and still be out of luck. So that's just a caveat with that.
I've done a lot of these type of talks, mostly for the human side, and we were kind of having a running joke that usually I'm in the other room with the end of life lineup. But I just want to say that of all the talks I've done, I don't think I've gotten so emotional, and there's been so much emotion in the room. Like, I've looked around and there's tears on nearly at least every second person in this room, and so it just goes to show the power. And so thank you, Greenwood, for doing this and having this for us. But it's like, yeah, if we're the crazies, well then I don't know.